Ophelia Grant hesitated for a moment outside the towering glass facade of Lessons, the city's most exclusive fashion boutique. Her thrift store dress hung loosely around her slender frame, slightly faded and patched near the hem. Her worn flats scuffed softly against the marble steps as she pushed open the heavy door. Inside, the atmosphere shifted instantly. The air was cool, scented with a delicate mix of jasmine and expensive perfume. Walls gleamed with polished glass cases displaying sparkling accessories, and crystal chandeliers cast glittering light across the floor. She stood quietly by the entrance, taking in the scene, a flood of impeccably dressed women and a few men, each seeming sculpted for attention. Champagne glasses tinkled softly in manicured hands, and soft classical music floated from concealed speakers. The plush carpet muffled footsteps, making Ophelia's simple shoes stand out. Across the room, a few shoppers glanced over, their eyes flicking quickly to her plain outfit. A whisper floated nearby, barely masked but sharp enough for her to hear. Is she lost? What hotel laundry did that come from? A lithe woman in a designer coat flicked her eyes with disdain, and her companion stifled a laugh as they turned away. At the boutique's entrance stood the greeter, a statuesque woman named Celeste, impeccably dressed in a tailored black suit that contrasted with Ophelia's modest attire. Celeste's gaze swept over Ophelia, measuring the threadbare handbag she clutched and the hesitant stiffness in her posture. An impassive mask settled over Celeste's face as she exchanged a subtle but pointed look with a colleague, silently assessing this unexpected visitor with thinly veiled suspicion. Nearby, a couple of patrons chuckled loudly, assuming Ophelia was a member of the staff misplaced among the customers. Their cutting remarks only deepened the chill settling over her, yet Ophelia remained still, absorbing the ill-concealed disdain around her. Celeste's heels clicked sharply as she approached Ophelia, the rhythm drowning out the soft murmur of conversation around them. Her dark eyes, cool and critical, locked onto Ophelia with calculated precision. "Can I help you?" she asked, her voice smooth but edged with an unmistakable undercurrent of condescension. Ophelia looked up, steadying herself against the rising flutter of nerves. "Yes, thank you," she said softly. "I was hoping to try on a few dresses." She gestured vaguely toward the shimmering racks that lined the boutique's polished walls. Her tone was polite, humble even, but firm enough to assert her intent. Celeste's lips curled into a thin smile, one that didn't reach her eyes. "I'm afraid the fitting rooms are closed for the afternoon," she said with a clipped finality. "Maintenance issues, actually. You wouldn't want to try anything on today?" Ophelia's brows knitted together, disbelief flickering across her face. "Oh, I wasn't aware," she replied cautiously. "Is there a specific time when they will be open again?" Celeste cut her off, her voice growing a shade louder, a little too loud for the intimate, hushed environment. "Miss, are you sure you're not mistaken? This is a boutique for our esteemed clientele, and the fitting areas are reserved strictly for their use during special appointments. I'm afraid you might be confused." Heads nearby began to turn. Ophelia's modest dress and humble shoes stood in stark contrast to the glittering guest list, feeding the murmurs that had already begun to ripple through the room. A woman perched on a velvet chaise lounge glanced at Ophelia and then turned to her companion, whispering loud enough for others to hear, "She looks like she works here." Lost, poor, or worse, the clearance rack survivor. Laughter bubbled up from a small group of elegantly dressed women nearby. Phones were subtly raised as a man in a sharp suit nudged his friend, nodding toward Ophelia while smirking. Ophelia's chest tightened, a cold wave of shame washing over her as the laughter swelled. Her polite smile faltered, but she said nothing. She shifted her weight from one foot to the other, fingers curling tightly around the strap of her worn handbag. Celeste sensed the moment was ripe and seized it with a flourish. "Perhaps it would be best if you left the fitting rooms, and, honestly, the store altogether. This isn't the place for you. The phrase landed heavy in the air. Leave the store altogether. As if Ophelia's mere presence was an intrusion, an offense to everyone here. A ripple of amused whispers spread. A young woman in an elaborate silk dress, with a voice sharp enough to cut glass, chimed in, "Maybe she thinks she's part of the sale, what a joke." Her laughter, high-pitched and sneering, invited others to join. Phones appeared from handbags and pockets, some recording the scene unfolding. Ophelia's cheeks flamed crimson, the heat burning deeper than embarrassment. It was humiliation pure and simple, played out under the cold scrutiny of strangers who delighted in her discomfort. Ophelia opened her mouth to explain herself again, but the words seemed to stick, tangled in the pit of her throat. She swallowed hard, steadying her breath. "I understand," she finally said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I'll leave." But as she turned, hoping for a moment of quiet exit, Celeste's voice stopped her. "No, you can stay here where you're visible. But I'm afraid we cannot assist you further today." Celeste's tone was ruthless, her intent clear. Ophelia felt all eyes locking onto her as if she were a specimen under a microscope. The murmur swelled into whispers and snickers. Someone from the group demanded, "Is she part of the staff? Maybe she's just lost. Poor thing." Another laughed, "Like she even belongs here." The weight of their scorn pressed down on Ophelia's every nerve. Her face flushed painfully as she stood frozen. For a moment, she considered fleeing, but instead she took a small step back, clutching her bag tighter to her side. Her heart pounded, not from exertion but from the sting of rejection. She scanned the room, searching for a kind face, an ally, but found none. Everyone was either watching with amusement or turning away with averted eyes. No one stepped forward to defend her, no one offered a word or gesture of kindness. It was as though she had become invisible and excluded all at once. The music continued, calm and indifferent, the chandeliers glittered above with haughty brilliance. The branded mannequin just behind Celeste bore the latest season's finest gown, expensive, precise, and utterly unattainable, much like the atmosphere that now seemed to encompass Ophelia herself. Despite the ache inside, Ophelia held her head high. She refused to burst into tears or shout back. Instead, she simply lowered her eyes, took a soft breath, and waited for the moment to pass, even as the sensation of being exposed in a sea of polished perfection clawed deeper and deeper. The boutique greeter turned and walked away, heels clicking crisply once more. Ophelia remained standing in the now cold silence, caught between worlds, the glamorous one she'd dared to enter, and the stark reality that she didn't belong, at least not today. Minutes stretched on. The crowd resumed their conversations, the flashes of cruelty fading, replaced by polite smiles that hid their relief that the discomfort was over. But Ophelia's figure remained still, a quiet anomaly in the midst of shimmering luxury, a reminder that beneath the boutique's glittering surface, harsh judgments waited to be wielded like weapons. No one helped. No one noticed. The door swung gently behind her, sealing the moment in a fragile memory she would carry with her long after the lights faded. In the quiet glow of the boutique's recessed lighting, Celeste returned to the polished marble desk near the entrance, her posture a perfect blend of poise and triumph. She exchanged a brief nod with the store manager, a man named Lawrence, who had been observing the scene with a faintly approving smile. "You did exactly what I asked," Lawrence said, dry and clipped. "We can't afford to have just anyone wandering through here, threatening the exclusivity our customers expect." Celeste's eyes sparkled. She clearly didn't belong. "We protect the brand by keeping out imposters." Her voice was low but resolute, as if outlining a crucial piece of boutique policy that others failed to understand. Some people just don't realize that this kind of luxury demands a certain, discipline. If we let anyone in, the value drops. As she spoke, the usual buzz of conversation and laughter swelled again in the boutique's corners. The incident seemed to dissolve rapidly from everyone's attention, or so Celeste hoped. She poured herself a glass of champagne from the tray held by a passing server and raised it with a self-satisfied smile. Meanwhile, Ophelia retreated quietly to a small seating area near the rear of the store, close to an ornate window that overlooked the cobblestone street outside. She sank down into a velvet armchair, her tremulous fingers still gripping her handbag like a lifeline. Her breaths were shallow, a mix of effort to remain composed and the sting of humiliation that refused to fade. She closed her eyes briefly and then opened them again, forcing herself to focus. Though she tried to pass the moment off as nothing, tears pricked stubbornly at her lids. She wiped them inconspicuously with the edge of her sleeve. Around her, the boutique thrummed with life as stylists arranged garments and shoppers chatted and traded compliments. For a time, Ophelia fought the urge to flee, to disappear entirely. But then, amid the low hum of conversation, a sudden movement caught her attention. A sharply dressed woman approached briskly, someone Ophelia had not noticed before, a member of the event planning team, recognized by the boutique emblem embroidered discreetly on her cuff. "Ms. Grant," the woman asked politely but firmly, holding out a small, glossy envelope stamped with the boutique's insignia. "We've been looking for you. The owner requested your presence." Ophelia blinked, startled. "The owner?" "Yes," the woman confirmed. "I'm sorry if there was any confusion earlier. Please follow me." Whispers began to ripple through the crowd. The light chatter lowered, eyes shifting like flitting shadows toward Ophelia again. Around her, the energy in the room changed subtly but unmistakably. The scent of expensive perfumes seemed to blend with something sharper, anticipation. Moments later, a man with a fine tailored suit and a discreet earpiece appeared near the main entrance. He approached a group of boutique employees, speaking quietly but with urgency. "Have you seen Ms. Ophelia Grant?" he asked, voice calm but authoritative. "She is expected at the front right away." The employees exchanged swift glances before nodding urgently and pointing toward where Ophelia sat. The luxury patrons paused in their browsing, their smiles caught halfway as they observed the scene turning toward something unexpected. Celeste noticed too, her confident mask faltering for a fraction of a second. The hum of polite conversation dimmed and a ripple of curiosity spread like a pulse. Some shoppers glanced toward their phones, fingers poised to capture whatever was about to unfold. Ophelia felt a swell of nervous energy pulse through her veins, racing in tandem with the shifting atmosphere. She stood slowly as the event coordinator gestured to the entrance of a more private, ornate room beyond. "The owner wishes to meet you. Right now." As she followed, Ophelia's breathing steadied again, tempered by a determination that was growing in parallel with the mounting attention. The space beyond was hushed, softened by plush carpets and artfully arranged lilies in tall vases. The voice and laughter of the boutique's elite faded behind her, replaced by a radiant quiet filled with possibility, and the hint of dramatic change. Steps echoed toward them, and with them came a presence that altered the mood entirely. Lawrence, the boutique owner, entered the room with a slight nod to the event coordinator. He paused, fixing his eyes on Ophelia with a mixture of respect and something like admiration. "Ms. Grant," he said clearly in the polished accent of someone who speaks in commanding boardrooms and glittering social events. "It is a privilege to welcome you officially. We had expected you earlier for the unveiling of our new collaboration." The room seemed to hold its breath as Ophelia's identity shifted in the collective imagination, from a simple woman in thrift clothes to the architect of the very vision the boutique was eager to present. The earlier snubs and taunts faded against this stark new reality. Outside, the patrons were already murmuring, whispers echoing around the racks. Those who had chuckled moments before now looked toward the entrance in disbelief. Eyes lingering on Ophelia were full of questions now, stammering apologies, and subtle shifts of posture as embarrassed glances passed between them. Back in the room, Ophelia offered a quiet smile. She didn't raise her voice or gloat. Instead, she explained, "I prefer simplicity in my dress. It's a choice, grounded in my work and values. I happily dress plainly because my focus is on my creations, not the trappings of wealth." She glanced briefly toward Lawrence. "I've just returned from a humanitarian trip abroad, where I found inspiration for this new line. It's the essence of what I want to communicate." Lawrence nodded, impressed by her grace and humility. "Your vision is exactly why we want to showcase your designs here. The collaboration will change the boutique's future." Ophelia looked out the window toward the boutique floor, imagining the crowd's shifting reaction. A quiet power held her, unspoiled by the jeers of moments earlier. It was clear the boutique, and its patrons, were not the only ones who would be transformed by what she was about to bring. The soft rustle of fabric and low hum of restrained excitement filled the air once again. But this time, the energy was different. It carried the weight of revelation, of a woman who had moved through exclusion to quiet triumph, and the flutter of change that would ripple through every corner of the polished sanctuary she had once been so cruelly denied. Outside, the whispered judgments and cruel laughter settled into stunned silence. Suddenly the boutique felt smaller, its walls no longer impermeable but vulnerable to the unmistakable force of dignity and success standing firmly before it. The plush double doors at the boutique's entrance swung open with an elegant creak, and Ophelia followed Lawrence into the main showroom, every step heightened by the sudden hush that had fallen over the gathered guests. Glasses paused halfway to mouths, conversations tapered off mid-sentence, and eyes turned toward the woman who had been the target of whispered derision only minutes before. Lawrence cleared his throat, stepping confidently to the center of the room. "Ladies and gentlemen," his voice carried with undeniable authority, "it is my distinct pleasure to welcome our honored guest, and soon-to-be partner, in an exciting new venture." A spotlight from above briefly illuminated Ophelia, who stood quietly, her hands clasped in front of her, an image of poised modesty amidst the swirling storm of attention. Lawrence gestured toward her. "Ms. Ophelia Grant is the visionary designer behind the upcoming collection we will be unveiling tonight. Not only is she the creative force driving innovation in fashion, but she is also the principal investor in this boutique's expansion." A collective gasp echoed among the crowd, as jaws slackened and eyes widened in disbelief. The snide whispers that had once cut through the room were instantly swallowed whole, replaced by a ripple of murmurs filled with astonishment and curiosity. Celeste's previously assured mask shattered completely. She took a step back, her pale face draining of color as she locked eyes with Ophelia, disbelief warring with the humiliation settling on her features. Some guests fumbled with their phones, shocked fingers ready to capture the moment, the unassuming woman transformed suddenly into an icon of prestige before them all. A woman who had been one of the loudest critics just moments ago lowered her silk-clad hand and muttered indistinct apologies to no one in particular, while her companion quickly glanced away, cheeks flushed. Those who had openly sneered now shifted nervously, casting furtive looks toward Ophelia, suddenly unable or unwilling to meet her steady gaze. Ophelia remained calm, serene even, as she allowed the room to absorb the revelation. She took a small step forward and began to speak, her voice warm yet measured. "Thank you all for this warm welcome," she said gracefully, eyes sweeping the room. "I dress simply not out of necessity, but choice. I believe that focusing on humility and substance rather than extravagance allows my work to speak for itself." A gentle smile brushed her lips. "Just this morning, I returned from a humanitarian trip, where I found inspiration not in luxury, but in resilience, culture, and the simplicity of life abroad. My collection reflects that spirit. Around her, the contrast between Ophelia's quiet strength and the boutique's lavish excess was sharp and unmistakable. Her minimalist goodwill was a mirror held up to the world of opulence that had first rebuffed her. It was as though the room itself was learning a new language, one of respect and softened judgment. Lawrence nodded in agreement, moving to her side with a proud smile. Ms. Grant's contribution to fashion and this brand marks a new chapter for us. Her vision will reach audiences far beyond these walls. The tension that had gripped the room loosened into a buzz of excitement, but beneath the surface remained an undercurrent of reckoning. Celeste, caught between mortification and fury, stood rooted to the spot. The glitter of her carefully applied makeup contrasted sharply with the growing dullness in her eyes. She opened her mouth to speak, but no words came. The room's shifting attention and energy left her exposed, her earlier hubris replaced by a deep, settling silence. Ophelia glanced in her direction, not with bitterness or scorn, but with quiet dignity. This moment was not about revenge, it was about redefining the bounds of respect. One journalist stepped forward hesitantly, adjusting her glasses. Ms. Grant, if I may ask, why choose to dress so modestly here, in the midst of such opulence? Ophelia replied thoughtfully, because true style and success don't demand extravagance. In fact, simplicity grounds and empowers me. She paused, then added, it allows the work and the message to shine without distraction. I hope my designs will reflect that philosophy. The question lingered in the air, softening minds hardened by wealth and exclusivity. Guests began whispering amongst themselves, some nodding solemnly, others quietly reconsidering their earlier judgments. In the crowd, murmurs rose to soft applause, not yet thunderous but growing steadily. The boutique seemed to exhale, its previous rigidity breaking as the room embraced the new narrative Ophelia embodied, one of strength through humility, creativity beyond attire. For a fleeting moment, the glittering chandeliers seemed to shine less for display and more as beacons of a changed understanding. The guests who had mocked her now found themselves the ones shrinking inward, uncertain where to look or how to respond. The boutique's atmosphere, once sharp with snobbery, softened to an uncertain but undeniable acceptance. Ophelia's calm presence radiated across the room, planting seeds not just of admiration but of introspection. Her success story, born not in wealth but in talent, vision, and empathy, had shattered the unspoken rules of the place. As the event moved forward with newfound excitement, the boutique itself seemed forever altered, no longer just a temple of fashion, but a forum for transformation and grace. The boutique's atmosphere shifted palpably in the moments following Ophelia's poised introduction. Lawrence stepped forward, his voice steady and commanding, cutting through the murmurs that still echoed among the stunned guests. Celeste, he said, his gaze locking on the now pale-faced greeter, your conduct today was not only unprofessional but damaging to the very reputation we seek to uphold. Effective immediately, you are suspended pending a review of your position and customer relations approach. We expect our team to embody the values we promote, and exclusion or prejudice has no place here. Celeste's mouth opened slightly, but no protest escaped. The flood of humiliation she had unwittingly sparked turned back upon her. The room's attention, previously fixed on Ophelia, swung towards this unfolding reprimand with a mix of satisfaction and discomfort. Whispers began, a ripple of judgment from the crowd that rippled like a quiet tide. Guests who had once averted their eyes now regarded Celeste with thinly veiled disdain. Conversations leaned toward recounting the incident, condemning the arrogance that had reigned until just now. The glitter of interest gave way to icy stares and subtle avoidance. Celeste, once the confident center of attention, found herself isolated, shrinking beneath the weight of her own actions. Days passed, and the public fallout escalated beyond the boutique's polished doors. Social media buzzed with posts about the incident, some voicing outrage on behalf of Ophelia, others debating the nature of inclusion in elite spaces. The greeter's name trended for all the wrong reasons. Within the brand's headquarters, the Human Resources Department initiated mandatory sensitivity and customer service training for all staff. This sobering process forced a reckoning for Celeste. Invitations to workshops replaced her usual schedule of greeting patrons. Policy manuals were spread across desks where she sat, quietly taking notes as part of her retraining. One afternoon, weeks later, fate orchestrated a quiet encounter that held its own gravity. Celeste, walking through the boutique's back corridor, collided softly with Ophelia, who emerged from a private consultation with designers. The sudden meeting caused an awkward pause, the earlier arrogance drained from Celeste's eyes, replaced by a vulnerable hesitation. Ophelia regarded her calmly, offering a small, knowing smile, devoid of malice, but rich with quiet strength. Celeste averted her gaze, swallowing hard, the weight of remorse settling heavily upon her. "Ms. Grant," Celeste managed softly, I'm sorry. For everything." Ophelia nodded gently, her voice steady and kind. "Thank you. That means more than you might realize." She paused, considering. People can change. Celeste's shoulders relaxed just a fraction. "I hope so." As Ophelia turned and walked away, leaving the corridor behind, the boutique seemed to hold its breath once more. Outside, the doors gleamed under the afternoon sun as Ophelia stepped confidently back into the city streets. The once snobbish boutiques and glittering facades of wealth no longer carried the same intimidating weight. Instead, she carried with her a quiet power, the unshakable grace gleaned through adversity and authenticity. Those who had witnessed her transformation at Lessons would remember this moment, a simple woman walking away with unspoken authority, reshaping the very fabric of the place that had doubted her. Within the boutique, the air had shifted forever. The whispers of exclusion had been silenced, replaced by an enduring lesson in dignity and the true meaning of elegance. The guests departed that evening buzzing not just about fashion, but about the remarkable woman who had challenged their assumptions and won. Ophelia's presence lingered like a gentle tide, a reminder that in places of exclusive luxury, true value lies not in opulence alone, but in the strength, perseverance, and grace of those who walk through the doors with purpose and poise.